Hi, everyone. Welcome to our third seminar series event for this year. I am Sada Khaber, the co-chair for the Autism Special Interest Group, which is part of ABCT. Our SIG collaborates with autistic self-advocates and focuses on work that is aligned with the priorities of the autistic community, which includes promoting meaningful clinical care. To get to know more about our several initiatives, you can visit our website and also follow us on Blue Sky. We recently transitioned to this platform from X. Also, be on the lookout for our fall seminar series events. More details will follow in the coming months, so stay tuned. The next one is coming up in August, which is our internship and postdoc panel. We also have exciting events coming up at the next annual ABCT conference in New Orleans. We hope to see many of you there. We do rely on member donations to support our travel awards, virtual seminar series events, and other events every year. So do consider donating, please. Without any further delays, I invite Elizabeth Sheridan, the co-chair for our seminar planning committee, to introduce our wonderful guests for today. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Sadaf. We're so excited today to have this webinar. I am here today on behalf of Allison Ratto, who's the committee co-chair with myself and our seminar planning series, to introduce these wonderful panelists. So I'll just walk through one by one. So John Donvan is a multiple Emmy Award winner and currently serves as moderator-in-chief for Open to Debate, the nation's premier debate program, heard on public radio and via podcast. As a journalist, Donvan held multiple global postings for ABC News and CNN, including Moscow, London, Jerusalem, Amman, and the White House. He has also anchored ABC's Nightline program. As a graduate at Dartmouth College and the Columbia University School of Journalism, he resides in Washington, D.C. Caren Zucker is a director, producer, and journalist. Her work at ABC World News Tonight, Nightline, and the PBS NewsHour has won multiple awards, including the Emmy, DuPont, and Peabody. She has traveled the world and told stories for more than 25 years across a broad range of subjects. Zucker left behind daily journalism to transition into writing and documentary filmmaking. Her work has focused on the needs, challenges, and gifts of autistic people, a commitment that began with the autism diagnosis of her oldest child, Mickey. Her narrative account of autism as a diagnosis, co-authored with John Donvan, was a New York Times bestseller and a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in General Nonfiction. Titled In a Different Key, it was the inspiration for Zucker and Donvan's documentary film of the same name. Broadcasted on PBS, the film was critically acclaimed and was honored with the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award. Zucker and her husband, John McGinnis, live in New Jersey. And finally, Amy Gravino, MA, is an autism sexuality advocate, speaker, and relationship coach in the Center for Adult Autism Services at Rutgers University. She is also the president of Ascot Consulting, which offers autism consulting, college coaching, and mentoring services for organizations, schools, and individuals on the autism spectrum and their families. Amy is an international speaker who has given TED Talks, spoken twice at the United Nations for World Autism Awareness Day, and presented worldwide to audiences on a variety of topics related to autism, with a dedicated special focus and research on autism and sexuality. She was featured in John and Caren's documentary, In a Different Key, which will be our focus for today. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to pass this off to our panel.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Allison and Sadaf. And hi, Caren, and hi, Amy. And Amy, it's been a while since we've seen each other, so it's great to see you again.
Well, it's great to see you too.
And Caren and I are delighted that we're going to actually be able to show people your appearance in our film before, as an introduction to you. So thank you for your patience as we're going to lead up to that, but we're going to talk about some other things first. Caren, you want to say hi?
I want to say hi and thanks for having us. And we're really excited to be a part of this event. It's a really powerful time in our community right now. So we're glad to be speaking with you today.
So we're going to be talking, as mentioned in the introduction, about our film In a Different Key. and how we have seen it like put to a new use, especially in the times that we're in right now. It's based on our book in a different key, but it's different in that it's the book is all 100% history. The film is history mixed with discussion of current issues and challenges and needs and solutions for people on the spectrum. But for those, I suspect some of you have seen the film, but for those who haven't, we thought to give you an overview of it by showing you the trailer, which goes for about 2 minutes. So I'm going to share my screen to make that happen. And if you stand by, I will be bringing you that.
I've always known Don. I don't remember not knowing Don.
We knew that Don was a little different, but what it was, we didn't know.
He is the first person to be ever diagnosed with autism.
At the time, autism wasn't even a word.
I had heard that the first person diagnosed with autism might still be alive and living in this small town in Mississippi.
Good to see you.
Hey, Shelby Welby. Hey, Nat the cat.
Well, hi, Don, darling.
Hey, Chandler the plant.
Stop resisting. Get the cups. Hey, can I go, please?
I only knew that I was different, and that different was bad. You're weird, you're a freak, you're a retard, you're a loser, you're ugly. These were the things that I heard on a daily basis.
Come on, go, go, go.
In my research study, every Black family that I've met with has asked a similar question. How do we keep our children safe? How do we fix this situation so that our children won't die?
Toasty? Yeah.
Like that.
Autism is a little different. Your brain works a lot differently than most people.
Hello. Hi, Caren. Hi. Hello.
Do you get any kind of support from anybody?
Not really. It's just me. Nobody's going to do what I do.
So you just can't die?
Right. It's got to be immortal.
Don's got some odd behaviors and some eccentricities, but he's our guy.
I was just so drawn to him in this community. I wanted to figure out, how did they get it right? Because they really did get it right.
So that is the core piece of work that Caren and I spent forever in our lives putting together. Caren, do you want to, I think so much of it is framed at the beginning and the end by Donald. Why the story of Donald means so much to us.
I mean, Donald taught the world, I feel like, what community means and how easy it is to have the back of somebody who's different. And we feel like this film really tells that story. And it also, what we've tried to share with society in general is that we're all different. And that doesn't mean it really is easy to have the back of somebody who's different. And you can do that in many different ways, across the spectrum.
We really wanted to show that it can be done. This town that Donald grew up in, born in the 1930s, in the deep South in Mississippi, it's not stereotypically like the symbol of acceptance, but Donald was accepted by his community all his life. And
they were very protective of him before we even met him, and we had found him. We reached out to his family and friends and said, could we come down and meet Donald and talk to him? And they said, we would welcome you, but if you mess with him in any way, we will track you down and get you. And so before we even got to Forest, we could see there was something very special going on around there in terms of community and support and acceptance.
We lost Donald almost 2 years ago, and if we have time near the end, we'll talk about what happened at his funeral because it was really, really quite beautiful. But it encapsulated that acceptance again. But our theory in writing the book and in making the film is fundamentally that people on the spectrum, um, they have their own agency, but the ability that they have to live in and the resistance to fit in and to belong is so influenced by whether everybody else around them is going to be accepting and understanding and recognizing. And that maybe some people just need a little bit of information. They need a little bit of a shortcut to understanding what it is when we talk about being on the spectrum and life on the spectrum. And our film does that. We did screenings over the last couple of years in more than 23 states, and we saw some audiences who knew a lot about autism and some audiences who knew very little, but afterwards were grateful to know more and to have it shared with them in a way that was, as you'll see with Amy's section, is like really, really entertaining and easy to understand, but also deeply important and meaningful. We feel, we just came back from INSAR last week. We went out to Seattle, and we were interested in knowing how all of the scientists are responding to the fact that right now the HHS, Department of Human Services, and its secretary is kind of like bypassing the work that they've been doing for the last 30 years, declaring things like genetics is a dead end, that the cause of autism is going to be found in a few months, doing it a different way with us setting up a registry that a lot of people find confusing. And we really thought that now is a time for again, some kind of education for people to not get the wrong idea from the pronouncements out of this department about what it means to be autistic. Caren, I mean, I know you're the mother of an autistic son, and you were personally offended by the way RFK Jr. talked about people with profound challenges.
Everyone on the spectrum deserves dignity and respect, and the way that RFK described and didn't even explain that this was a section of the community, that this was a section of people who were more profoundly affected, and took out sort of the darkest moments of their lives as opposed to touching on anything that mattered in their lives, was, incredibly insensitive and just wrong. And that's not how anybody in our government should be talking about this community.
So I live in Washington, D.C. I'm talking to you now from Washington, D.C. And it turns out, I didn't know this until about 7 days ago, I live about 4 or 5 blocks from where RFK Jr. now lives, that he's moved to Washington. And my wife was out walking our dog, and she said, I just saw RFK Jr. walking down the street surrounded by 5 Secret Service guys. And I thought to myself, I wish I'd been with you, because I would have said to him, Mr. Secretary, there's something I want you to see. And I would have wanted him to see not just our film, but the portion we want to show you now, because the way in which he discussed the challenges of people at the more profound end of the spectrum just came across, as Caren said, as so harsh and unnecessarily bleak and dark. And just the notion that there's no love there, there's no agency, no creativity. I just wanted him, and if I get the chance again, if I see him on the sidewalk, I'm gonna risk shaking up the Secret Service guys, but I'm gonna walk up to him and say, "There's something I want you to see." And the irony is, our film won an award named for his father. I should have brought the award with me to the screening, but it's a bust of RFK Sr. It's a really, really big honor. And so because of all of these connections, I felt like I wanted to share the film with him. But
I think Amy wanted to say something maybe before you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Amy. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
No, it's okay. Just that, watching the trailer now, we did this a few years ago, this was filmed, and it's made me deeply emotional watching it, because it feels like the world that existed when we were making that is almost lost with everything that's been happening. And it shatters my heart deeply. All the work we've done, everything we have tried to do to humanize autistic people, to potentially have it wiped away in one fell swoop, is devastating beyond measure. And looking at Donald, his story, obviously that's the ideal, that's what we would hope for. But the thing that I took that I've always taken away from the film is that that's the promise of what things could be. And I want to hold on to that promise, but it has shaken me to think how different things were just a few years ago when we made that, and just how crushing it's been these first few months of this year to navigate all this. And now last month was World Autism Month, to have those words said by RFK in World Autism Month of all times. I think for me and for many others, it was probably one of the hardest World Autism Months we've ever had. I could say for me, it certainly was. It's not just about for individuals with higher support needs, with more profound support needs. It dehumanizes everyone, because it says that people can only be seen as human when we see them at their worst moments. It says that the only way we can humanize someone is to dehumanize them. It's a strange paradox. Maybe that's what he thought he was doing, but he did not do it well in the slightest. And I would love for him to see this film one day. I would love to hope he'd be open to hearing from people. He already turned down an invitation from a coalition of autistic-led organizations I just read this morning. They invited him, and he turned that down. So, I mean, I always want to be an optimist. I'm a failed pessimist at heart. That's what I call myself. But it is such a hard time right now, which means that we can't do this ourselves. Me, John, and Caren, everybody here today, this is on you as well, to take the message we're saying here today and do something with it and make a difference in the lives of all autistic people.
Wow. I'm so glad you stopped me before I showed anything else. Thank you for that. So I want to show you what we've created, and I just need you to tell me whether you can see our website.
Right now we're seeing the toolkit.
Okay,
Yes.
so we built a toolkit around the film that exists online. It's by subscription, and what it does is it includes the full film, but what we really wanted to do is to put it into little chunks for specific purposes that groups can use in different ways. So we broke it into 13 parts, and each of these parts, this is the page that breaks it into these shorter clips that take on different topics that you can see. Where I'm going to come back to profound autism, but different aspects of the life that happen. Police misunderstanding is one, friendship and love. Each of these comes with a set of discussion notes and questions and answers. So we want to show you the one with profound autism because that's the one. If I had to sit down with RFK and say, I want you to see one part of this, because as Amy just said, he may feel that he's like bringing attention to a neglected part of the spectrum, but the way he's doing it isn't particularly useful. So it would come that would come with this discussion sheet and the introductory context that I'll read it out loud. If you were talking with a class of people who didn't know very much, you could use this as a script. Autism is much more recognized today than it used to be. We can see this reflected in TV shows with autistic characters portraying the social struggles autistic people have in settings like work or school or in the world of dating. And this is real progress. But these stories often leave out autistic people whose autism affects them with much more profound disability, so that no one is making TV shows about them. They represent nearly half the autistic population. They're often intellectually disabled, incapable of fluent speech or the ability to care for themselves in the most fundamental ways. Over time, they have become the less visible part of the autism spectrum, but their stories deserve to be told also. And that's what we'll see in this scene from In a Different Key. And so you could come back then to this clip, and this again it's an excerpt from the movie, but it's been cut to stand by itself. Sorry?
Okay. No, you got it.
Don't hit me. I don't like you when you hit me.
No one wants to hear about the autistic person that attacked his mother or smashed his head against the floor. Like, that's a really disturbing story, and no one wants to hear it.
Don't hit me. I don't like you.
When I look back on those years that Jonah was aggressive, I don't know how he got through it. These rages would come over him multiple times a day, often. I mean, they never lasted very long, but 15 minutes of your kid trying to rip your hair out or bite you or kick you is is a long time when it's happening.
Amy Lutz has been raising a son with autism for almost as long as I have. But they're profoundly different young men.
Jonah loves to spin. He turns on some Sesame Street music and he starts flying around the room. He looks like Scott Hamilton on ice skates sometimes.
Jonah has a family that completely loves and supports him. They really get him. And they get that he has something to say, like his Sesame Street drawings.
There's always a lot of some movement in Jonah's art.
When you put them together, you can see that he's creating this motion, like a cartoon.
When he is through with his series, he will crumple it up and just throw it in the trash can, because art is all about process for Jonah, not about product. You know, I can describe Jonah and talk about his struggles for the rest of my life, and I'm sure I will be doing that. All right, Jonah, number 2 is walk. Can I help you with your socks? I don't believe that Jonah has a real conception of what it would mean to leave home and what it means to have a job. And, you know, these are really abstract concepts, and Jonah does not have abstract concepts. I'll do the socks, you do the shoes. He has no safety awareness. And if you notice, we have these code locks on all our exterior doors that we had to install to prevent Jonah from wandering. When Jonah was younger, he would find a way to slip out. Someone, you know, he'd get out the front door, he dropped out of some windows, and several times we found him walking down this busy road on his iPad, you know, with traffic stopped on either side while somebody tried to coax him out of the road and somebody else called the police. Those of us who live with autism, you know, in its more severe forms, we don't think of it as a gift. It's incredibly disabling.
You want some help?
I've seen kids who have to wear helmets and arm stays to keep them from bending their arms, because as soon as you release them, they punch themselves in the face hundreds of times an hour until they detach their own retinas. You know, I've seen autistic teenagers that still have to wear diapers, kids that have no language at all. And I think that's an incredibly important distinction to make, that when your neurodiversity starts to really restrict your opportunities in the world, that's not an identity, that is a pathology. And if everybody could accept this idea that at some point neurodiversity shades into pathology, and we don't even have to have a huge argument about where exactly that point is, I think it's about how much it impacts your functioning in the world. Yeah, did you get the princess some steak?
What's that?
Did you get the princess some steak? I would love not to have to talk about Jonah's previous aggression. I would love not to have to talk about his, his cognitive impairments. Oh, sorry, excuse us. But I do that because it's critical that those with the most profound needs are central to any conversation about policy, about stigma, about autism writ large.
I think the spectrum is enormously broad, and so everyone who can speak for themselves should speak for themselves. And if people think I'm somehow subverting her thoughts or wishes or desires, then I would just say I'm doing the best job that I can.
I would love that if Slade could speak for himself. I hope he can. But until he does, I am definitely his protector and his facilitator to help him navigate life.
I think autism now is a meaningless diagnosis simply because the range of people who excuse us, sorry.
Excuse me.
Who carry that diagnosis is impossibly broad, to the point that you don't know anything about a person by hearing that that person has been diagnosed with autism. Over here. Stay with mommy and daddy, please. researchers are starting to talk about the autisms, that Jonah's autism is not the same as John Robison's autism, and that it's not useful to think of them as the same.
You're heavy.
We love this place because not only does Sarah give Jonah like a great haircut every time, but they don't mind if he lies down on the floor or he starts spinning, and they're totally cool with it. They really welcome Jonah into their shop, and we're so happy to bring them our business.
What did you think about the people who were coming in for haircuts and how they treated Jonah?
I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing a lot now these days, is that people are nice.
Excuse us, sorry. No, go ahead. I'm sorry, he's lying, you're right.
Often people will stop and say, he's great, or I know someone with autism, is he autistic? They really accept him there, they welcome him there, and that's why we keep going back.
People might see the disability, and when you're a parent or when you're around them all the time, you just see their personality, and his is just so pleasant and sweet that, he's just a great guy. He's a great worker. He's great around the house. And people may not see that, and they may see our situation as difficult if they really didn't know what he was like. Like that. Good.
Caren and Amy, you want to say anything about that?
That's my favorite moment in the film, when Matt connects with his dad in the way that he connects with his dad. And it's the beauty of the film too, is to have someone like Amy here today to show how really broad the spectrum is and how misunderstood it is. And which is why In a Different Key is sort of the perfect title for it, because there are so many differences on this spectrum. And Amy shares that with us in the section from our film, which talks about people who have different kind of struggles and no less critical in their lives.
I did want to mention that, I recently attended the Profound Autism Summit, which I saw Caren at. We ran into each other. And the woman you saw in the film, Amy Lutz, gave a presentation about autistic representation in the media, which kind of ended up being very polarizing for a lot of people in the audience. There were several of us who were autistic adults in the audience, but also non-autistic members of the audience, I think, had a very strong reaction to some of the things that were said, which is kind of a reflection of some of the divisions that have existed between parents of individuals with, higher support needs, more profound needs, and autistic adults. And just something to point out is that many of the representations that are on TV are, what I call TV autism. They don't actually represent any of us, really. They're what neurotypicals have decided is a palatable version of autism. But there's just as many adults on the spectrum with lower support needs who don't feel that those representations show who we really are, that it's, when most of us are not savants, most of us are and most of us are not Rain Man either. We're kind of somewhere in the middle of there. And so even shows like Love on the Spectrum, which has been on the air for a couple of years, it's still through a neurotypical lens and made for a neurotypical audience. So you have the authenticity of autistic adults being themselves, and adults who have a range of support needs, but it is still framed in a way that's meant for neurotypical consumption. And so if you had, again, autistic people behind the camera, that would make a difference too. I think in all the representations, we'd be seeing something much more authentic if we had that. But those divisions, unfortunately, I think have continued on, and it's led to discussion about that the individuals like myself who can speak for themselves are the ones taking services away from individuals with higher or profound support needs, which is also not true. None of us are really getting the supports that we need. And what we need to be doing, especially in times like these, is putting our voices together and uniting and speaking up for all of us, to get those supports and to get our voices heard rather than fighting each other. So there's still some contention, and even with the Profound label, which now I think has been, it was passed by the I don't know, was it not the DSM, it was another organization.
The Lancet, the Lancet.
The Lancet, that's it, yeah. But there's a lot of people who are pushing back against that label. because of the feeling that it does segregate people rather, and it I'm trying to think how to explain it, just that it minimizes the abilities that a lot of people with that particular pathology might have, and it doesn't necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of things online. People have different viewpoints, and I see both. Having attended the summit, I see the differences. I know that there are people who have challenges that far exceed my own, and yet the lens I look through it at is that I used to be afraid of the word autism. You know, when I was younger, I backed away from the diagnostic label. I blamed everything that was wrong with me on autism. And I knew what people thought of when they heard the word autism, and I didn't want to be thought of that way. I no longer feel that way. I no longer feel ashamed of the word autism, and I no longer feel ashamed of the breadth of the spectrum. I believe everyone has the right to dignity, to respect and to receive the supports and services that they need, and to be seen as full human beings, regardless of ability or neurotype. So we still have that tension, obviously, and that friction in the community, and I hope that we can overcome that and move past it to unite in this area and improve quality of life for all of us.
And I think you put that beautifully. And in the film, we give voice to everybody who's got something to say on that topic. So it's not just Amy Lutz. John Robeson speaks to the point that you're making also, and others do as well. We tried very hard to not start fights with the film, but to offer what can be a bridge. And I think the thing, Caren, we really wanted to get across in telling Jonah's story, contrary to, I think RFK's statements kind of leave the impression that there's nothing to appreciate about a person who has profound autism. And what you saw that family doing around Jonah was love and appreciation for who he is.
And sharing that that thing that most people don't actually get to see that often. I do think that in some ways RFK has brought the spectrum, the sides of the spectrum together for the first time ever, because the people are upset just in general about how this community is being described, and nobody's taking account of how broad the spectrum is. And that's what the goal of our film and our toolkit has been, which is to show, you know, it really is a huge spectrum, and community is really what it's about in terms of making it work and making people's lives on the spectrum just as good as, you know, somebody who isn't on the spectrum.
All right, so we promised that we're going to show a big chunk of Amy Gravino being fantastic in our film. I'm going to share this page. This would be the discussion sheet page that would lead into the section that we show from the we're going to show from the film that focuses on Amy's work. I'll read the script. You don't have to use this script, by the way. It's just suggested. The desire to belong is nearly universal. Almost all of us want to feel connected in some way to the people around us, but being different is often stigmatizing, and that sets up huge obstacles to inclusion for many autistic people. Unfortunately, this often starts when individuals are young and still going to school. Being shunned at school, or worse, being actively bullied, becomes a scarring experience for many on the spectrum. This sequence from the documentary In a Different Key brings the voices of a few different autistic people who still remember what that was like. And this is the vignette. It's called Bullying All Audiences version because this is the X-rated version. We have a version that can be shown to public school students. You'll see why we have the two versions as you listen.
Well, there we are, seniors of 53.
There you are. This is Martha, that's me.
Oh, yeah, let's see. Don, you have much ability, and in the past you have put it to good use.
Mine is up to a wonderful classmate. All the luck in the world to you. That's what I wrote. But I can't read the rest of it because it's faded.
Now, that's not great. I just love this. I wish myself luck.
Yeah.
Isn't that good?
That's what Don wrote to himself.
I wish myself.
I wish myself luck. DG.
Just adore that.
Donald really did get lucky. For a lot of people on the spectrum, school is the most painful time for friendship.
I was just different, and they just didn't understand that.
I was beat up. People said mean things to me.
I think that there is a specialness to the bullying that children on the autism spectrum experience because we don't always know that we're being bullied. If you were to look at photographs of me growing up, you would, for a while, you'd see a very happy little girl. You'd see a girl with out of control curly hair, and then a girl who gradually, by the time she was around 12, 13, stopped smiling. Even though I was diagnosed at the age of 11, the word autism didn't really mean anything at that point. I only knew that I was different and that different was bad. That was the response that I received from my peers. You're weird, you're a freak, you're a retard, you're a loser, you're ugly. These were the things that I heard on a daily basis. And what ended up happening was that the voices of my peers became the voice in my own head. But all of my feelings about myself at that point were things that I didn't like. I couldn't point out things that I did like. And there wasn't a whole person there. And I wanted to die because I couldn't think of another way out. My mother says that I came home from school one day, took off my backpack and said, I feel like killing myself.
It was so bad that, I would come home from school every day crying.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of block it out. I remember the people who stood up for me. Here, hey, down here. Stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. Lift them instead of putting them under your foot. So you may think that, what you're saying may not make a difference to this person, but believe me, it makes all the difference in the world. And they will carry that with them for the rest of their lives.
I'm coming back on because I got the two versions mixed up. So the X-rated part got cut from that. So I'm going to go back to the full film and just jump into the middle of Amy's section. So bear with me, please.
I think the spectrum is
Using the bathroom there and not making a mess, like right
for life.
So you might.
Whenever a new manager came in.
Mickey, there's a hanger on it.
But it's Mickey, we don't always know. I was just different.
Here we go.
The one I was gonna lose.
I flipped the versions by mistakes.
I think that there is a
It's a show, is, we're seeing you, John.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thanks for that tip.
Children on the autism spectrum experience because we don't always know that we're being bullied.
Amy Gravino is this really cool person, and
are you seeing it?
No, we're seeing you're pressing the buttons.
Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna do it again. Do you see Amy?
Yes.
Okay.
That.
I was beat up. People said mean things to me.
I think that there is a specialness to the bullying that children on the autism spectrum experience because we don't always know that we're being bullied.
Amy Gravino is this really cool person, and she speaks honestly and openly about her experience as a woman with autism.
And I decided that he was the one I was going to lose my virginity to.
And she's known best for her talks on sex and autism.
And I thought, well, when you stay at a hotel or you eat at a restaurant, sometimes they have these cards you can fill out to say what your experience was like.
And she tells this one really funny story about what she did the morning after she lost her virginity.
So I created a sexual intercourse comment card. And these were the questions on the back, so it's a little hard to read. So what did you enjoy most about this sex session? What did you think could have been better? What happened that you'd like to have happen again? Please rate the following from 1 to 5. The outfit I had on, my facial expression. If you were to look at photographs of me growing up, you would, for a while, you'd see a very happy little girl.
Okay, I'm going to stop it because that's the section that gets lifted out so that it can be shown in high schools. But
Not even
I want to,
explicit. Jeez,
pardon me?
it's not even explicit. It's not
Oh.
like I went into detail.
We talked with the high school principal once and said we'll get a lot of pushback if that's in the but the rest of it you saw, and then Amy goes on to talk about the part that you already saw about being bullied. So Amy, everybody wants to hear from you, so the floor is yours.
Sure. Well, I don't know what it is specifically people want to hear, but essentially, yeah, my work has been in autism and sexuality for a number of years now. I can kind of trace back through my life when I look back the threads that sort of led to this point, just always feeling comfortable talking about sex, never feeling any sense of shame, and unless somebody told me that I should feel ashamed. And being a writer, I started writing erotic fiction when I was around 14 years old as a way of accessing my sexuality and discovering who I was, because I didn't have other outlets available to me the way my same age peers did. And so that's always just been there kind of in the background. And then as I started getting older, and then when I just decided to go to graduate school, I got a master's degree in ABA. And I knew just from being an autistic adult that there's a lack of services and supports for adults on the spectrum. So that was always my area of interest rather than early intervention, which is what most of my peers were concentrated on. And again, in the area of dating and relationships, there just was so little in the research literature. And I just felt like this is a huge gap that needs to be addressed. So my thesis study was using a combination of written instruction, role playing, and video modeling to teach two adults on the spectrum how to ask someone out on a date. So that was kind of the start of that. And I've been speaking professionally since 2006, although the first time I spoke publicly was when I was 14 on a panel for an autism organization on Long Island where I grew up that my mom was on the board of. But I began doing it professionally, around 2005, 2006. And in 2013, Dr. Peter Gerhardt, who's a very dear friend and colleague of mine, invited me to present with him on the topic of sexuality. He'd been doing it for many, many, many years. And he did the clinical kind of side, and I did the personal side and talked about my experiences, as you see there in the film. And then after that, I began developing kind of my own presentation and figuring out how I wanted to talk about the subject, which up till that point, I think, and from presentations I had seen, was addressed very dryly and very, in a very stuffy way, and certainly from a heteronormative perspective, almost entirely. And, that's not, the way that I present is very different, I think, from a lot of that. And what's happened now is that a few years ago, I got a grant through my work at Rutgers. I'm a relationship coach at the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services. And I obtained a grant from Next for Autism, my first as a principal investigator, in collaboration with Dr. Vanessa Ball, who's the director of the Lifespan Lab in the center, to develop a sex ed curriculum called ASK, the Adult Autism and Sexuality Kit, for college students and young adults on the spectrum. And that's what we set out to do. And the idea was for it to be autistic led and developed, not just saying, here's neurotypicals telling you how to do neurotypical things when it comes to dating and preparedness for sex. That was ultimately what we decided to focus on because it's such a broad area, was preparedness for sex through the lens of healthy relationships and personal safety, which are two of the 7 main content areas in the National Standards on Sexuality Education. So we did stakeholder interviews and we worked off of the ANSWER curriculum, which is the oldest sex ed curriculum in the country, which is housed at Rutgers. And I had also worked with Laura Graham Holmes, who had been at Drexel. She was one of you people. Now she's elsewhere now, but she was doing a lot of work in this area. So I've been getting more experience just being exposed to what people are working on. And there's still very few of us, doing this. It's not as if it's a big group of people. So it's always, I usually know when somebody is doing a presentation or talking about, oh yeah, I know that person because, there's so few of us. But the curriculum is completed. We ran it, and I think we had some very good results. And now we're trying to package the curriculum, make it something that can be distributed to professionals in the field and to the public. So that's, now I'm trying to figure that out because I've never packaged a curriculum before and I don't know how to do that. So I'm trying to take that next step with getting that out there. And I'm also still doing all the presentations. I travel all over, giving talks about sexuality, sexual health particularly is a big focus now. And last year I had the opportunity to present at SMSNA, which is the Sexual Medicine Society of North America, their annual conference, which was in Arizona. And my talk was put into a symposium with 3 other talks. And one was about rough sex, one was about prostate parties for gay men, and one was about sexual assault in the military. Fine topics, but my talk had no business being in that symposium, which was called Sexual Potpourri, by the way. That was the name of the symposium. I'm like, what am I doing here? And it became abundantly clear to me that, medical providers, especially gynecologists, urologists, whoever, have no concept of how to work with autistic patients and have no training and information and don't realize they have autistic patients right now that they're working with. And so I'm currently collaborating with Dr. Jess Kauke, with whom I co-authored a book chapter along with Dr. Gerhardt about sexuality. We're collaborating to start a task force to collect and disseminate information about autism and sexual health to medical providers. That's what I feel we're being called to do. I think it's just so important. And it's, just to give you just to get this anecdote, I think sums up what the current attitude is. A man came up to, I had presented last year at the sister conference to SMSNA, which is ISHWISH, the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health. After my talk, and it was a symposium all dedicated to disability and sex, which was great, a man came up to me who was a urologist. The conference was in Long Beach, California, but the guy was from New Jersey, which is where I live. What are the odds? And he says to me, matter of fact, has a son who is autistic, and his son has a friend who is autistic and has intellectual disability. And he performed a vasectomy on this young man without his permission or consent. Said it to me just completely matter-of-factly. And I had no concept of how to respond. And he said something about how it was to make it easier. Well, easier for who exactly? And I've had questions in that vein come up to me when I do my talks about from a parent, should a parent have a procedure done for their daughter to stop puberty? And there's such a history in this country of forced sterilization and reproductive choices being taken away from autistic and disabled people. There's no possible way for me to ever consider condoning any kind of procedure like that, because the slope is so slippery. But this is where we're still not acknowledging the autonomy of autistic people. We're not acknowledging autistic people as sexual beings who have the right to determine their own reproductive choices. And the thing is, things have actually gotten better, believe it or not. There is more research being done, which is phenomenal, but we still have so much work to do, and especially with the medical community. So that's something I'm trying to turn my focus to. And I'm also writing a book, as John and Caren know, which is a memoir of my experiences with dating as a woman on the spectrum. I really am trying to finish it, I swear to God. So it's called The Naughty Audience.
It's going to be a great book.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, I just saw you pop up on screen. Did you want to?
Yeah, a few great questions have come in. So I don't want to, Amy, you are just a wealth of great information. So by no means, if you're finished, I can go ahead. Actually, one of the questions is a perfect segue to what you were just talking about. So I can start there if that's all right. So Amy, folks are wondering if you have recommendations for how to talk to families about the importance of sex education for autistic youth. So specifically from a lot of the folks in the room are clinicians trying to help families in their journey developmentally. So obviously that's a big question, but if you have some main takeaways, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Well, Elizabeth, I just want to mention, I can't see any questions. The Q&A is empty from my vantage.
It was messaged to me directly, but I'll put it in the chat so you can see it.
Okay.
But let me just, so the main thing is recommendations for how to talk to families about the importance of sex education for autistic youth.
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is have me talk to them. That's what I do. I talk to families and parents as well. I talk to every kind of audience. And I think one of the biggest things, parents always say to me after they hear me speak is, hearing you talk now, I can see my autistic child as person, not just as my child, which is, I think, one of the biggest hurdles. For many parents, I mean, even parents of neurotypical kids don't want to think of their children as sexual beings, but you add autism into the equation, and it's even more so the case. And we have a lot of, this infantilization that occurs, which is where we see autistic young adults and adults as children in big bodies. And so that's not a great thing. So that's the first thing, is to, realize we're going to spend the rest of our lives as adults, not as children. Like, we need, if your mindset is that you want to keep your child safe, you don't want them to experience abuse, which unfortunately is extremely high among autistic individuals. You don't want them to experience an unwanted pregnancy or an STI, whatever it could be. The way you keep someone safe is to empower them, is to give them information, not to withhold information. Because when you withhold that information, you inadvertently set someone up to be a perfect victim, right? You make it so someone can't say what's happening to them if something is happening to them. You know, when people don't have the language to describe, you know, what is happening, like that makes them extremely vulnerable. And so, I mean, I think I would say to parents, like, your fears are legitimate and they're real, and you have every right to your fears, but you cannot make your fears your child's responsibility.
That's so powerful. Thank you, Amy. Pivoting for a moment to think about the film more broadly, a question came through for John and Caren that's really important and I think speaks to the SIG that we have around inclusion and acceptance. And the question is, what was the most powerful way you saw Donald's community and other communities in the film practicing acceptance and inclusion?
Can I start that answer, Caren?
Yeah, sure.
I think the biggest thing that we saw was a very subtle thing, which was that that community knew that Donald was different. As somebody says in the film, we knew he was different, but we didn't know what it was. And she was talking about going back to the 1950s when they were all in high school together. They knew he was different, but it had become not important to them. It had become not relevant. He wasn't different in a way that meant he was looked at as a weird guy or looked at all. He was included in everything. It's a small town. They do a lot of things together. They get together. They just saw his diagnosis as like not that big a deal. They weren't even that aware of it. And so I mentioned that we went to his funeral, and I was hoping we could tell that story. So something you need to know about Donald, if you haven't seen the movie, is that when he was growing up, he loved numbers. He used to do calculations and he would write down numbers all of the time. And one thing that he did with numbers was that he would give a number to people that he met and made a connection with. So, for example, I'm number 550. Caren, you're what?
549.
549. And what's your theory about why we have those numbers?
Because I'm younger.
Yeah, because you're younger. So,
But the thing is, I want to pick up a little bit. The triplets asked us to speak at Donald's funeral, and this in some ways was the accumulation of everything that we learned and saw and tried to show in the film, which was this pure, acceptance. And John mentioned as we were up there, just kind of casually to see, how many people had a number, which John
and
was
the church was packed, we should point out. Like, this was a church packed with the whole town came for Donald's funeral.
Do any of you have a number? Did anybody, get a number from Donald? And all of a sudden, in this quiet, reserved church who's celebrating the life of Donald Triplet, hands start bursting out everywhere, and they're shouting out their numbers. I'm 695, I'm 1023, I'm number 23, and I'm 42. And you could see this was the community. They were all connected to this man just because he was who he was, not for anything that he wasn't. They embraced him, he embraced them, and they all brought to one another, richer lives.
So I think we both feel, in answer to the question, what was the most powerful way we saw Don's community practicing acceptance? The most powerful way came at the very end. We already were pretty blown away by it, but that day, when that happened, we left going, boy, this was something really amazing here. And we were so thrilled. Nobody knew about Donald's story until we were able to discover it and tell it. After his death, the news of his passing went around the world, and there was a half-page obituary in the New York Times. There was a half-page obituary in the Washington Post. There was a full page in the London Economist, USA Today, CBS News, the whole, and we were seeing it come from around the world. The whole world now knew Donald's story, but they didn't just know that this was the first child diagnosed with autism. They knew that the community had accepted him. That became part of the story. And it was exactly what we dreamed of when we started telling his story, that we would be able to get that message out there.
That's really beautiful. And I think to close this out, there's a question that just came through in the Q&A. It's a long one. I want to make sure to save 1 or 2 minutes that you all, both Amy, you can talk about, we can put in the chat your consulting website, but also John and Caren will put the toolkit in the chat so folks can know how to access that and potentially incorporate that into their practices. So I'll read this last question and ask Amy to do her best in 2 minutes or less, and then I'll put those links there. But the question is, first off, thank you so much for all the incredible work you've done and continue to do. I work with an inclusive post-secondary education program. These students all have intellectual disabilities, but many of them have diagnoses of ASD. Much of our work at the university with them involves preparing them to enter the workforce by teaching them the necessary skills. However, issues of dating, sex, identity, mental health, etc. come up often. It seems that those with IDDs, every other identity, they don't get swept away, e.g. people assuming they don't experience sexual attraction, that they're all straight and cisgender, etc. As a result of this, I've seen how students are negatively impacted and it's difficult to watch. I try to help how I can, being available and a source of support, but I want to do more. Are there larger scale ways I can advocate, ways to support that stick out? Thank you. So again, that's a very big question. And so Amy, if you could take a stab at it, and then I'll put, again, your consulting website so they might be able to email you directly if you need more time.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's something I talk about in my presentations as well, how there are actually many people on the spectrum who do identify as LGBTQ, I think even more so than in the neurotypical population. And that's something that, we overlook the idea of intersecting identities, right? That people can be more than one thing. We forget that autism is not the whole of who someone is. Someone can be autistic and gay, or autistic and trans, autistic and black and gay, or whatever it could be. So all the pieces of someone's identity impact how they're perceived by the world and how they perceive the world in turn. I recently did a training that was commissioned by Peter Gerhardt and Jess Kauke through ABA Tech, and it's all about sexuality and autism. It's available through ABA Tech, and there's an entire presentation from Zoja Zaks that's all about LGBTQ identities and autism. Zoja is a trans man on the spectrum, and he delves into all that. Like, that is a great resource. I mean, look up anything Zoja's done. I would say he is really practiced on that subject. And it's just that thing of that, like what I said about recognizing that people have, multiple parts of their identity. You see that, right? You are in contact with these students, reflecting that back to the people who they're in contact with in their lives, whether it's parents or other clinicians. We often tend to, I think when we're talking about students or clients, people get reduced to what is in the file, the list of symptoms or the list of whatever's going on that day. We forget that there's a whole person in front of us, right? That's some, or we reduce people to the data on the graphs, the data we took yesterday, the data we're taking today, so on and so forth. And it's easy to, again, lose sight of the human being that we're ultimately working with, and to realize that sexuality isn't just behaviors, that we're either trying to decrease, or something or skills we're trying to teach. Sexuality is part of human expression. It's part of who someone is. So just affirming to the individuals you're supporting that you see them, you see who they are, and you're going to always make sure to do what you can to make sure that they are seen.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I'm acknowledging we're right at time. I think I'd love to have just a final parting thought from you all. This is such a beautiful film, and the way it really does try to build bridges across the entire spectrum is just so important, and something that many of us are focused on as well. So I'd love just to thank you one last time and give you a moment just to have any parting thoughts or ways folks can contact you.
I think you're putting on the Elizabeth, did you put on the site that if they want to see the toolkit and or get any information about the film? I mean, for us, the message is community. The message that we created this film for people to get, how broad this spectrum is, and that it's something that if you understand it and if you're aware of it, it makes life so much easier to embrace people. And I think that we still don't know. I think there's still so many people out there that don't know what autism is. And you can laugh and cry and watch our film and you walk away sort of having a pretty good sense of it.
I'm going to let Karen's words stand for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Amy, any final thought?
Yes, just that I hope what you've seen today has inspired you, has moved you, has made you feel something. Even anger is fine as long as you feel something rather than nothing, and has made you want to go out and do, take action to stop the terrible things that have been happening and to, make a difference in the lives of all autistic people. As I said at the beginning, we can't do this alone. The message in this film is incredibly important, but it's, you have to take it and do something with it. It can't stop here today at this event, at this discussion. It has to go to the next place, which is having you not just as allies, but as accomplices to autistic people. We need you next to us in the jail cell in the morning going, "Ooh, what a night that was." That's what we need, is for you to make sure that all autistic people can enjoy what I call the dignity of risk, which means that being a human in this world is not always inherently a safe thing, but being able to go out to take chances, to get your heart broken, to make mistakes is part of what it means to be human. And the only way we can learn how to get back up is to be able to fall down. So I'm so glad that you're all here today, and thank you for being willing to listen.
Fantastic.
Thank you for us too. Yeah, really.
Thank you all. This has been really powerful. We're glad it's recorded, so folks in the future will be able to watch this as well. So thank you all for attending. As you saw in the chat, there's several contacts that you could follow up with our panelists, and also the feedback form. So if you have a chance to give us feedback on this seminar, we'd really appreciate that as well. So enjoy the rest of your Friday, and thanks again to our panelists.